Hi friends, welcome to my channel Malinka Yarn Crafts. If you're new here, my name is Alicia and I create and share crochet tutorials for different skill levels, from crochet stitches and home decor to crochet accessories and garments. In today's tutorial, I will be showing you how to crochet the Primrose cardigan. In this video, I will be making size small. You can find the written pattern in a printable PDF version for sizes extra small all the way to 5XL in my Ravelry and Etsy shops. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please give it a like and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. For this project, I use line brand Heartland yarn in color Less and Volcanic. I will post the amounts of yarn needed for each size in the description box below this video, so make sure to check it out. If you need to substitute this yarn, you can use any medium worsted or number 4 weight yarn. We're going to use two different hook sizes, a 5.5mm or US size I and a 6mm or US size J hook. We are also going to need a yarn needle, scissors, stitch markers, and a measuring tape. If you would like to add buttons, you are going to need some 25mm buttons, 3 or 4 depending on size and your personal preference, and regular sewing thread and needle to sew the buttons on. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with our front panels, and for the front panel, the first thing we're going to do is going to be the bottom trim, so the ribbing here. For the ribbing, we're going to use the smaller of the two hooks. So it's the 5.5mm hook. You can go ahead and make a slip knot, and then we're going to chain 11. So the stitch we're going to be using for the ribbing is going to be the yarn over slip stitch. It is also sometimes called the half double slip stitch because it does start with a yarn over. As you can see here, this ribbing does look like the knit ribbing. So it looks like rows of knit and purl. So it's quite pretty, and it is the same, looks the same on both sides. Okay, so we're going to start in the second chain from the hook. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook into that second chain. Then we're going to yarn over and pull all the way through all the loops. So pull through that loop and then pull this one here, the yarn over, through the remaining 2 loops on your hook. Okay, so let's do that again. We're going to yarn over, go into the next chain, yarn over, and then pull this yarn over loop through all of the loops that are on your hook here. So 1, 2, and 3. Again, yarn over, go into the next chain, yarn over, pull that loop through the first loop on your hook, the second loop on your hook, and the third loop on your hook. Okay, so we're going to do this until the end of this row. So we're going to have a total of 10 stitches here. Okay, so if you count from the top here, you can now see that you have 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, for our next row, we're going to chain 1 and turn. So we're going to be working the same stitch, but from now on, we're going to be working in the back loops only. So if you look at the stitches here from the top, instead of working through both loops, we're going to work in the back loops only. Okay, so again, yarn over slip stitch, we'll have double slip stitch in the back loops only. You have to watch out with this stitch because when you look from the front, on the front here, it also looks like you have a whole stitch. So you have these V's here. Okay, and this one here is from the yarn over, so that's not your stitch. So you do have to look from the top here to identify the back loop. All right, so I'm going to start my row over with a chain. chain 1 and turn. So yarn over, you're going to start with the very first stitch here and go into the back loop, yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. Again, yarn over, go into the back loop only of the next stitch, yarn over and pull through all the loops. Okay, so we're going to work this until the very last stitch. So we want to have 9 of these, and then for the very last stitch we're going to do something slightly different. Okay, so I have 9 stitches here and I need 1 more. So for the very last stitch in the row, we actually don't want to be working in the back loop only. I'm going to show you real quick what's going to happen if you work in the back loop only. Again, so here at the end, you're going to end up with this gap. So we want to prevent this gap from forming. So I'm going to go back. Basically, what we want to do on the very last stitch in the row is work through both loops. So you can yarn over and go through both loops. So 1 and 2. This could be a little bit more difficult on that very last stitch because it's a little bit tighter, and then work the yarn over slip stitch through both loops. Okay, so back loop only for 9 stitches, and then the very last one is going to be through both loops. I will also show you really quick another technique. So another way of doing this is to work the same, but instead of working as normal from front to back, we're going to work from back to front. So we're going to yarn over. Again, we're going to work through both loops, but instead of inserting our hook from the front, we're going to insert it through the back. So back loop and then the front loop. And then go through all of the stitches. Okay, so you can use either method. So you can use the first one I showed you going from the front if this second one is a little bit more difficult for you. So if it's hard, go ahead and do it as regular from front to back. However, this one looks a little bit nicer. You can see the bottom of my ribbing here. It just looks so much neater, and it's a little stretchy. So this is why I'm using that method. However, if that seems too complicated, feel free to just use the regular method of working through both loops from front to back. It's still going to look nice, and it's still not going to have the gap. All right, so from now on, we're going to repeat this row. So we're going to chain 1 and turn, yarn over, go into the back loop only of the first stitch, yarn over, pull through all of the loops on your hook, yarn over, go into the next stitch and pull through all the loops on your hook up until the very last stitch, and then work through both loops on the last stitch. So we're going to be repeating the same row over and over again until we reach the length of the ribbing that we need. Okay, let me finish this one up real quick. Okay, so I can show you one more time this very last stitch. Okay, so the top loops here, we're going to work into both of them. So you can work from front to back, or you can do what I do and work from back to front right there. So pull through those 2 and then through the 2 on your hook right there. Okay, now we're going to repeat this row, and for the size that I'm making in today's tutorial, which is size small, we're going to need a total of 30 rows for the front panel. So the front panel here will have 30 rows of ribbing. So you can count them as you go. An easy way to count your ribbing is if you start right there where your tail is. This is going to be row 1 right here in the valley, and then the ridge is row 2. So if you lose track, you can always count your ribbing rows this way. So this is the second one. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 29 right here, and this one is row 30. This is how you can count the rows on this ribbing. Okay, so the front panel, you're going to need 30 rows of ribbing. So let's finish the 30 rows and then we're going to move on to the main panel. Once we have 30 rows of ribbing, this is for size small. If you're making a different size, please check your pattern because it will have different number of rows for ribbing. So now we're going to be working on the main panel. So we need to transition from the ribbing to the main pattern here. And to do so, we're actually going to work on the side of the ribbing. So this was my last row that I've worked here. So we're just going to turn our ribbing sideways and we're going to work into the sides of ribbing rows, so up top here. So the first thing we're going to do is work single crochets into the top of these rows here. We're going to start with a chain one. Okay, so now basically we have to insert our hook into the ends of these ribbing rows and pick up some stitches. So we're going to spread out some single crochets on the side here. For this size that I'm making, so for size small, I am going to need 32 single crochets. So that again will depend on your size that you're making. So it's not always the same amount of increases. So 30 rows of ribbing and then I need 32 single crochets. That means that the rate is approximately 1 single crochet per row plus 2 more. So those additional 2 stitches, we can spread them out anywhere. So I'm going to try to do an extra stitch somewhere on one end and then an extra stitch on the other end, so closer to the end. Okay, so we've chained one here and we're going to start working single crochets. So the specific spot you're going to insert your hook doesn't really matter. You just kind of want to try to be at the very top of that row. So you're going to insert your hook into all the way through that row and yarn over, pull up a loop and yarn over, pull through 2 and make your single crochet. So this is our very first single crochet. If it does help you, you can always mark it with a stitch marker so that you know for sure which stitch is first, so you don't count the chain instead of the stitch. Okay, so I made 1 single crochet into this valley here, so now I have my ridge and I can work 1 single crochet into it as well. So I'm going to insert my hook here and work 1 single crochet into it. And as I mentioned earlier, I do want to work 2 single crochets per row 2 times, right? Because I need 32 stitches and I have only 30 rows. So here's where I'm going to add 1 more single crochet into the exact same spot. So I'm going to insert my hook into the same spot and work 1 more single crochet. And now I'm just going to work 1 single crochet per row. So 1 in the valley, 1 in the ridge, 1 in the valley, 1 in the ridge. Okay, so you get the principle. You're just going to keep going, and then somewhere towards the end here I am going to do 2 single crochets in the same spot again, so that I end up with 32 single crochets. All right, so let's work that until the end, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, once we completed the first row, it's a good idea to go ahead and double check your stitch count here. So depending on the size, it's going to be a different stitch count. So for my size small, I have 32 stitches. But regardless of the size, you will need to have a multiple of 3 plus 2. So go ahead and count your stitches again, and then we're going to move on to the next row. So going forward, I'm going to switch to the larger hook. So I'm going to use the 6mm hook going forward. Okay, so we're going to chain 1 and turn. To begin, we're going to work 1 half double crochet in the very first stitch. So yarn over, go into that very first stitch right there and work a half double crochet. Okay, next we're going to skip 1 stitch and work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet in the next one, so all in the same stitch. So here we go, we're going to skip this one and go into the next one work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and then 1 single crochet. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches and work the same thing. So 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet. So skip 1, 2, go into the next one, work 1 single crochet, then chain 2, and work another single crochet into the same stitch. We're going to repeat this pattern until the end of this row. So we're going to work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet, and we're going to skip 2 stitches every time. So 1, 2, go into the next one, and so on until we have 2 stitches left. Okay, so at the end of the row, when we have 2 stitches left, we're going to skip 1 stitch and work 1 half double crochet into the very last stitch. So I'm going to remove the stitch marker. So skip 1 stitch, go into the very last stitch, and work a half double crochet. Okay, so we start the row with a half double crochet. We skip 1 stitch, then we work 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet, skip 2 stitches, 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet, skip 2. And then at the end, we're also only skipping 1 stitch and work a half double crochet into the very last stitch. Okay, so row 2 is finished. In the next row, we're going to be working groups of double crochets. So typically when we work rows of double crochets, we start with chain 3 at the beginning of the row before we turn or after we turn. So when you work rows of double crochets, you start with chain 3 and turn, and then you work your double crochets. However, this kind of creates a gap here at the beginning of the row, and I don't want to have the gap here, especially when I will have to sew my panels together later. So I will show you what I do instead of chain 3. So instead of chain 3, I work the stacked double crochet. In order to work that, before you turn, so we're going to turn our work in such a way that our working yarn is behind our work. So we don't want to chain here. So just turn so that your working yarn is behind your panel. We're going to work a single crochet in the very first stitch. And as we work the single crochet, we want to make sure that our stitches are not too tight. We want to create the height of a double crochet here. So stretch it out to about half of a double crochet. Go into that very first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Again, stretch it out slightly. It doesn't need to be too long, but you don't want it to be too tight here either. So right there. And now you can yarn over and finish off that single crochet. So now we're going to create another single crochet on top of this one. And that's going to give us the stacked double crochet. In order to do so, we're going to insert our hook into the vertical bar at the front of the single crochet just made, right there. So right at the front of that, insert your hook into the front bar here. And just work a single crochet. Again, stretch your stitches slightly. We want to have the height of a double crochet, and then yarn over and finish off that single crochet. Okay, so we have the stacked double crochet here, which is basically made up of 2 single crochets worked on top of each other. Now we're going to continue our pattern, and in this row we're going to work 3 double crochets into every chain 2 space. So we're going to find that first chain 2 space, so this is the space right below the 2 chains from the previous row. And we're going to work 3 double crochets into this space. So yarn over, insert your hook into the chain 2 space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we need 2 more double crochets here, and 1 more. And we're going to do this in every single chain 2 space. So we're going to work 3 double crochets in every chain 2 space. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and work these until I reach the end of the row here, so until we reach the very last chain 2 space. Okay, after you work 3 double crochets in the very last chain 2 space, we are going to finish the row with a double crochet worked in the very last stitch. And the very last stitch is that half double crochet from the previous row. So we're going to insert our hook into the very last stitch and work a double crochet. Okay, and this row is finished. So this is row 3. Okay, so we had a row of single crochets and we had the row of single crochet, chain 2 single crochet, and now add a row of groups of 3 double crochets worked in every chain 2 space. For the next row, we're basically repeating row 2. So we're going to chain 1 and turn. We're going to work a half double crochet into the very first stitch. Here we go. Now we're going to work the same thing we did in row 2. So we're going to skip 1 stitch, which is a double crochet here, and then into the next stitch we're going to work single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches, so skip 2 double crochets and then go into the next stitch and work a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So basically the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet group is going to be worked into the second of the 3 double crochets from each group. So every middle. Okay, so we're working into the middle of every group here. So right here, then right here, and so on. Okay, so go ahead and work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet into the second of every group of 3 double crochets. You can also use the same method we used in row 2. Basically, you can just count, skip 2, and then work your group of single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So we skipped 1 in the beginning, then we skip 2, skip 2, skip 2, skip 2, and then at the very end we're going to skip 1 again. Okay, so here at the end of the row we're going to skip 1 stitch and work a half double crochet in the very last stitch. So yarn over. So the very last stitch is actually that stacked double crochet that we worked in the beginning of the previous row. So if you look from the top, you just know that you have to skip 1, and this next one is going to be the top of that stacked double crochet. So this is where you need to go. You can also look from the side, and because we did work basically 2 single crochets on top of each other, you can also see 2 stitches on the side. So you don't want to work in the first one, you want to work in the second one. So whichever way you're looking, from this side of this side, it's going to be the second one here. Okay, so we're going to work a half double crochet into that stitch, and this is going to conclude our row here. Okay, so from now on we're going to keep repeating the same pattern. So this is the primrose stitch pattern. We're going to alternate these 2 rows, so row 3 and 4. So the next row is going to be a row of double crochets, so 3 double crochets worked into every chain 2 space, and remember we want to start with that stacked double crochet. And then on the following row we're going to work a repeat of the row we just worked. So we're going to start with a half double crochet and work single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the middle of every group of 3 double crochets. We're going to repeat these 2 rows until we have the desired length of our panel. So for my size small in today's tutorial, my front panel and my back panel as well is going to be a total of 35 rows. So that includes the very first row of single crochets here. So 1, 2, and then 4, 6, and so on. So the very last row that you work in your panel is going to be a row of double crochets, okay? So we want to finish our panel in this row because it's flat. If you finish it in this row, it's going to be curly. So we want to finish it in a row of double crochets. So for size small here, I will have 35 rows total for my panel. If you want to, you can adjust the length of your panel depending on your preference. So if you want to have a cropped cardigan, you can do fewer rows, but if you like a long one, you are totally able to adjust this and work a few more rows until you reach the length that you want. So you would want to measure from the top of your shoulder and down and see how far down your panel will reach. You have to keep in mind that once you put this on, this stitch is kind of stretchy, so you will gain a little bit more length. So if you're measuring with a measuring tape, you just have to add a little bit more to the length because it will stretch slightly as you wear it, and if you want to block it, it will give it a little bit more length as well. Keep in mind that if you do adjust the number of rows compared to the written pattern, you may need a little bit more yarn or less yarn depending on the adjustments. Once you complete your front panel, you can go ahead and tie off and cut the yarn. On my front panels, I typically leave a very long tail. So for a small size, about 60 inches. If you're making a bigger size, you may need more. The reason I leave a super long tail like this is that afterwards, once we have all the panels ready, we're going to assemble the panels, and we're going to join the front and the back panels at the top here with slip stitches. So I want to have enough yarn here so I don't have to join and have an extra tail. Okay, if you don't want to do this, if you don't like working with long tails like this, you're welcome to just have a shorter tail that you can weave in and then just join a new piece of yarn when we get to the assembly part. Once you finish one front panel, you're going to make the exact same thing again. So we want to make 2 of these. So we need 2 front panels. So once you're done with one, go ahead and finish the second one as well. Okay, after you complete the 2 front panels, we're going to work on the back panel. The back panel is worked exactly the same way as the front panels, so I'm not going to go over the instructions again. I'm just going to give you the count. So you're going to start with the same ribbing you did on the front panel, and for size small, the back panel has a total of 66 rows of ribbing. So once you complete the 66 rows of ribbing, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to turn your ribbing and work a row of single crochets into the top, so into the sides of the ribbing rows. For this size, I have a total of 71 stitches. So you're going to work 71 single crochets along this ribbing. Okay, so that means it is again approximately 1 per row plus 5 extra. So those extra 5 is basically working 2 single crochets into 1 row of ribbing 5 times, and you want to spread that out. So you don't want them all bunched up in the same corner. So you can do basically 1 single crochet per row, and then let's say you do 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. So you want to spread them out a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact, but just want to spread them out so it doesn't bunch up anywhere. So then you're going to continue with the pattern and work these rows of primrose stitch pattern. So you're going to repeat rows 2 and 3. So you're going to work single crochet, chain to single crochet. You do have those half double crochets in the beginning and end of the row. And then the next row, that is groups of 3 double crochets, and you do have that stacked double crochet in the beginning of the row and a regular double crochet at the end of each row. So you're going to repeat these, and you're going to work the same number of rows. So again, I've worked 35 rows total, and we're going to finish again in that row of double crochets because it is a flat top row. If you made any adjustments in length to your front panels, then you have to make the same adjustments to the length of your back panel. Okay, so for my size small, both my front panels and my back panel are all 35 rows. That includes that first row of single crochets. And for the back panel, we are not going to need a long tail, so once you've finished with the back panel, you can go ahead and fasten off and cut, and only leave enough of a tail that is comfortable for you to use when you weave in your ends at the end. Okay, so go ahead and finish both front panels and your back panel, and after they're all done, I'll meet you back here and we're going to work on the sleeves. So the sleeve is basically worked in the exact same pattern as the other 3 panels. The biggest difference here is in the difference between the cuff width and then the rest of the panel. So as you can see here, when we start working our main pattern, we're going to have a lot more stitches on top of the rows of our ribbing. So go ahead and start with the same ribbing that you worked for the front and back panels. And for the cuff, we're going to need 28 rows of ribbing. So here I have 28 rows of ribbing, and this is the cuff for the size small. If you're making a different size, make sure that you check the written pattern for how many rows you're going to need for the cuff. Also for the size small, I'm going to need 56 stitches in my first row. So as I turn my ribbing and I start working single crochets on top of these ribbing rows, basically it is double the amount. So I have 56 stitches that I need to work into 28 rows of ribbing. So for this size, it's exactly 2 to 1. So I can work 2 stitches in every ribbing row. If you're working a different size, that may not be exactly 2 to 1, but it will be somewhere around there. So you may need to do only 1 per row in some parts, but you're likely going to need to do 3 per one. So please check the written pattern. As you can see here, after you're done with your first row, it's going to be super curly and look like this. Just wanted to show you this, that it's totally normal. Once you work your pattern for a few more rows, it's going to flatten out and look totally cool. It's going to be a little bit ballooned here at the bottom, but not too bad. So it's going to look just fine. So don't let this stop you. It is totally normal for it to be this curly in the beginning. From now on, you're going to work your regular pattern, same way we did on the front and back panels. And again, you want to switch to the larger of the 2 hook sizes, so back to the 6mm, and work your pattern in that primrose stitch. Okay, so we're going to work the same thing we did on the front and back panel, working in primrose stitch, so the 2 rows, alternate the 2 rows until we have the length that we need for our sleeve. So for this size, for size small, I ended up making a total of 33 rows for my sleeve. Again, you want to finish in the row of double crochets. All right, so go ahead and finish your sleeve. And then when you finish the first sleeve, you want to make 1 more of these. So you want to work the exact same thing and finish your second sleeve. After you're done with your second sleeve, I'll meet you back here and we're going to start on the assembly. Before we start sewing our panels together, we want to make sure that we mark our right side. So we want to be sewing on the wrong side of all of the panels. So I want to first make sure that I know where the right side is. So I marked them all with a stitch marker. The way I know where the right side is, basically the very last row that we worked on the panel of those 3 double crochet groups going this way, this is going to be the right side of our work. And this is going to be the case for all of our panels. So I marked all 3 with stitch markers so I know where the right side is. So we're going to start our assembly by joining the front and the back panels at the shoulder seam, okay, on both sides. And we want to make sure that we sew on the wrong side So I want the two front sides, the two right sides, to be touching each other. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this panel over so that the wrong sides are facing out. Okay, so the right sides are touching each other and the wrong sides are facing out. So this is going to be the case for both sides right there. So for the shoulder seams, I am going to be using the slip stitch, and I'm going to use that long tail that I left on my front panel to work those slip stitches and join the two panels together. So for my slip stitches, I'm going to be working through both loops on both sides. So we're going to work through both panels and work those slip stitches. And as you go, you want to make sure that your stitches match up on both sides. So we're going to go one by one. So the first double crochet on this side is going to be worked with a double crochet here. Then we're going to work the groups together. So the first double crochet on this side with the first double crochet on the back panel. And we want to make sure that we match up the groups, okay? If you want to, you can also attach them together with stitch markers. So as you go, the groups need to match up together. And then here at the end, you do have one extra double crochet, and that one is going to be joined to the following group, the first double crochet of the following group. So after we join both front panels to the back panels, we will have a gap here in the middle. All right, so let's get started on that. And I'm going to use my 6mm hook here, and I'm going to go through that very first stitch right here, and then go through the very first stitch on the back panel right there, the top of that stacked double crochet. And again, I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to bring my yarn back here and go ahead and pull through, and yarn over, pull through. This is just for the first one. So now I'm going to work slip stitches, and I'm going to go through both loops on the front panel and both loops on the back panel. Yarn over and pull all the way through. Okay. If you prefer to use the whip stitch, you can do that as well. You can use any joining method that you prefer. So I'm just going to use the slip stitch here at the shoulders. Okay, so just make sure that the stitches all match up. There we go. And go ahead and slip stitch all the way to the end of the front panel. Okay, so I just finished the last group of 3 double crochets, and I have one more here. And as I mentioned earlier, you do want to go into the first double crochet of the next group here on the back panel. And this is going to be the last stitch. And now we can go ahead and fasten off. And as you can see, leaving a little bit over 60 inches of yarn was just enough to work slip stitches across. And if you're making a bigger size, you may need a little bit more than that. Okay, so now we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. And here on this side, I'm actually going to have to start from the middle instead of the end because my tail is over here. So I'm going to have to determine where I need to start on the back panel. So again, we want to make sure that our groups match up. So we have the same number of groups on each side. So we can just arrange them against each other to make sure we have the same number of groups. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then on the 11th one, this is where I need to start because I have an extra double crochet here. Okay, so I'm going to go through here and that double crochet on the back and work the same way, just work slip stitches all the way across. Okay, so go ahead and finish up this side as well. And then we're going to move on and add our sleeves. For our next step, we're going to attach our sleeve panel to our front and back panels. So we're going to unfold them. Again, we want to make sure that the wrong side is facing us. And based on the seam here, I can also tell that this is my wrong side. And we're going to attach the sleeve panel right here. Before we start attaching the panels, we want to make sure that they're lined up properly and we know where our seam is going. So the sleeve panel here for my size, the total width is 14 inches. So I need 7 inches on each side on each panel. So from the seam, from the shoulder seam, I need 7 inches on each side, and this is where the ends of the sleeve panel will go. Based on my gauge, the 7 inches actually end up being exactly 14 rows. So I will need to count 14 rows on each panel, starting at the shoulder seam and down. So I need to find my 14 rows this way and 14 rows this way. So we can count the 14 rows on each side, and we do have rows of double crochets and rows of single crochets with those chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so right below this 14th row, right here, is where I want the sleeve panel to end or start. So I'm going to pin the two of them together. So the last stitch here is going to be attached to row 14, counting from the top. Okay. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And you can use your stitch markers that you use for your panels if you want to. Since based on my seam here, I already know that this is my wrong side. Okay, so now on this side, I'm going to count 14 rows as well. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So here's my 14th row, and this is where my sleeve is going to end here. I'm going to attach it to the end of the sleeve panel. Okay. And the other thing we want to do is pin the middle of the sleeve to the shoulder seam. So we need to find the middle. For my sleeve panel here, I have a total of 56 stitches. So the middle is 28 stitches. So I want to count 28 stitches. So, okay, and the 28 stitches end here. So we have 28 stitches on each side. And so the middle of this panel actually falls right in between these two double crochets, so it doesn't fall in a specific stitch. And this will depend on the size that you're making, so they're not always going to be an even number of stitches. So this one is an even number, so it fell right in between the two of them. But sometimes it's going to be an uneven number. So we're going to pin this middle to the shoulder seam right here. So right in between those two panels, and I want to pin it to the middle of the sleeve panel. All right, so once we have this figured out, we can go ahead and start on seaming these panels together. So we're going to attach our sleeve panel to the front and back panel right here. If you want to, you can add additional stitch markers here just to make sure that you're stitching evenly. You don't want it bunched up somewhere. And I am going to use the whip stitch for my seam here. Okay, so I started by turning my panels in such a way that I can easily start from the right. So this is where the long tail is that I left after I finished off my sleeve panel. So I turn my panels in such a way that I can work starting with this long tail. So I'm going to start whip stitching. Obviously you're going to need your yarn needle here, and it's going to go right here where the stitch marker is. Right there. Okay, so the whip stitch is the easiest method in my opinion. It's also virtually invisible once the seam is finished, but if you have a different preferred method of joining panels, you can go ahead and use that. So basically in the whip stitch, if you haven't done it before, you just go from front to back. Real easy. You don't cross the yarn right there. And you want to make sure that you tug on this yarn a little bit, but not too much. So we don't want it too tight and we don't want it too loose. And where the stitches are obvious, I am going through both loops here, and on the side of these panels here, it's really up to you where you go. You can use 2 loops or you can use 1 loop, just as long as you distribute your stitches evenly here and make sure that your panels are not bunching up anywhere. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going all the way across and joining these panels together. And once we're done joining this sleeve panel, we're going to have to do the exact same thing on the other side. So we're going to find those spots where the seaming is going to start and end here, and find the middle, and then go ahead and join the other sleeve panel to the other side. Once you've finished joining your sleeve to the front and back panels here, we're going to join the sides. So we're going to have to join the sleeve, the 2 sides of the sleeve, and also the front and the back panel together. So you can do that in whichever order is most convenient to you. At this point, it doesn't matter which one you do first. So you're going to fold them in, and I did have a really long tail, so I'm going to continue with the same tail that I used to attach my sleeve. So this is my right side, and we want to be joining on the wrong side. So we're going to fold in so that the right sides touch each other again, and the wrong side is facing us. So here's my sleeve. This is the shoulder seam. So now I have 2 options. I can either continue working down the 2 panels and join the back and the front panel here on the side, or I can go this way. We're going to do both, one after the other, so you can start with this one, you can start with this one, whichever works best for you. So these 2 will be joined the same way. So here, what you want to watch out for when you're joining the panels is that your rows line up on both sides, right? So if you want to, you can pin every so often, so every 4 or 6 rows together, and make sure they actually all line up. So you can pin one right there on row 1. Right at the end of the ribbing. And then you can count rows, and you can do every 4th, every 6th, and so on. It's up to you, because we want to make sure that our pattern lines up. So the rows of double crochets line up with the rows of double crochets, and rows of single crochets with chain 2 line up with rows of single crochet with chain 2 on the other side. And we're going to do the same thing on the sleeve as well. So these 2 sides, we want to make sure that the pattern lines up. Okay, so once you made sure the pattern lines up, if you want to, you can pin or just keep checking as you go. Go ahead and whip stitch all the way down the side and all the way down the sleeve here. And you want to do that on both sides, obviously. In our next step, we're going to work an edging around the front opening, and it's going to be the same ribbing we worked at the bottom here of all of our panels. First, we want to make sure that our cardigan is right side facing. So we did work our panels together, so we whip stitched the panels together on the wrong side. So you want to go ahead and flip it so that the right side is facing you now. Okay, Then we want to determine where we want to place our buttons. As you can see here, I did just place them on top of my panel. So this panel here, the one that is on the right side at the moment, is going to be the left front panel when worn. This is typically where we place our buttons. So our buttonholes will be on this side here. So it's left right now as we're working on it, but it's going to be the right panel when worn. Okay. So basically what I did is I tried to figure out where I want the top button to be and where I want the bottom button to be, and then I kind of eyed the middle. You can also take a tape measure and measure the distance between these two buttons and make sure that this one is exactly in the middle. And then if you do want to add an additional button, make sure you do that at this moment. I decided to stick with 3. Because it did turn out kind of cropped for me, so I don't want too many buttons here. All right, so once you decide where your buttons are going to be, you want to add stitch markers at the same level on the opposite panel. So approximately the same, so you want it to be on the same row. So I went ahead and marked the rows where I want the buttonholes to be. Obviously, this is not where the buttonholes are going to be. They're going to be worked into the ribbing here. But I want to know the level at which the buttonholes need to be. Okay, so this is where I placed my stitch markers. All right, so once you have this ready with the stitch markers on this side, so this is a left facing us. When you're wearing this is going to be the right panel. Now I can set the buttons aside and start working on the edging. So we're going to work the edging starting at the bottom right corner, so as worn. So it's left facing us right now, but when worn, this is the bottom right. Okay, so I'm going to flip it so I can start working right here. So this is going to be where we start our edging. And the edging, again, is going to be worked with the same ribbing pattern that we worked on the bottom here. The difference is going to be that we're going to be working it into the side of the panel here, and we're going to be joining as we go. So we don't want to work it separately and then join it. We're going to join as we go. So we're going to work up and down like this, and we're going to join it with slip stitches as we work up. Okay, so we're going to join a new ball of yarn at the very bottom corner here, and I'm going to use the smaller of the 2 hooks again because I am working a ribbing pattern. So I'm going to go to my 5.5 millimeter again and join the yarn into this corner here. Again, this is the bottom right when worn. Okay, so I'm going to join a new ball of yarn right here. So I want this ribbing here for the edging to be slightly shorter than the one on the bottom, and I am going to start with a chain of 9. So I'm going to have a total of 8 stitches for my ribbing on the front edging here. Okay, so for the first row, we're going to do the same thing we did on the bottom ribbing. So we're going to work yarn over slip stitches into every chain. So yarn over, start in the second chain from the hook, right there, and slip stitch all the way through. So you should have a total of 8 yarn over slip stitches at the end of this row. So now we're going to connect this ribbing to the side of the panel here. The way we're going to do this is going to be by working 2 slip stitches into the panel here. So we're going to go into this next stitch that we haven't used yet through both loops and just do a regular slip stitch. So yarn over and pull all the way through. So we did one and we want to do one more. So go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull all the way through. So 2 slip stitches. Okay. Now for the next row, we're going to turn. So every time we are going to work away from the panel, we are not going to chain 1. Okay, so no chaining every time you work away from the panel. We're also going to work yarn over slip stitches in the back loop only, the way we did on the bottom ribbing there, but we're going to skip these 2 slip stitches. So the 2 slip stitches that we used to connect our ribbing to the panel, we're going to skip them. So we're going to yarn over, skip these 2, and go into the first actual stitch. So go into the 3rd stitch from the top here, into the back loop, and work your yarn over slip stitches from there. Okay, so we're going to have 8 of them here as well. However, in this row, on the very last stitch, we want to work through both loops again. So we did that on the bottom ribbing, and we want to do it here as well, but only when we are on this end of it. Okay, so not here, but only on that end. So here we can work through both loops, and I'm going to work it with my method of working from the back to front. Again, you can also just work from front to back as usual. Okay, and we finished this row. Okay, so for the next row, we're going to chain 1 and turn and work back towards the panel again. So we're going to work back loop only, yarn over slip stitches again. However, if you look here, once I start working back, I'm going to be close to my first stitch marker for my first buttonhole. So basically I want to start creating the buttonhole. So that's what I'm going to show you now. So we're going to work our back loop only, yarn over slip stitches, and then we're going to work a few chains to create that buttonhole. So because we do have 8 total stitches, I determined that I will need 2 chains for my button, so the size of my button. So we're going to go ahead and start with 3 yarn over slip stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now I want to create my buttonhole, and in the middle here, for the next 2 stitches, I'm actually going to skip them. I'm going to work 2 chains. So we're going to chain 2, and then skip 2 stitches and work 3 more yarn over slip stitches in the back loop only. So skip 2, and then go into the 3rd one and work 1, 2, and then 1 more. Here, every time you're going to be close to the panel, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to find that last stitch. So make sure you always count your stitches when you come back so that you don't actually skip this last stitch. So I have 1 more I need to make. So you want to flip it over and find that stitch, and it's right here. Okay, so we want to work into it as well, so that we have the right number of stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 2 chains, and then 3 more. And at this point, you can go ahead and test and make sure that your button can fit through this hole. They always stretch a little bit too, so you can just try it out and make sure that it fits. If you have bigger buttons, you may need to adjust this, and you may need to do 3 chains instead of 2. If that is the case, you will have to see where you want it, because we do want it to be right in the middle of this ribbing. So you may have to adjust the number of stitches. So if you're doing 3 chains here, you might need to have a total of 9 stitches in your ribbing row so that you have an even number on each side of that chain. All right, so we're back here, and now we need to join this ribbing to the panel again. So we're going to go into that next stitch that we haven't used yet. So you can see right here where we used this stitch right on the side. So we're going to go into the next one and work a slip stitch, and then into the next one. So we want to join with 2 slip stitches. So 1 and 2. Okay, so we're going to turn here and no chain. We don't chain every time we work away from the panel. And we're going to repeat the same thing. So we're going to do yarn over back loop only slip stitches, and we want to skip those 2 slip stitches that we used to join. So skip 2, go into the next one, back loop only, and work the yarn over slip stitches. And once we reach the chains here, we're just going to work into the chains the same way we worked in the first row, so work into the back loop of chains, and we're working the same pattern, and then we have 3 more stitches. Okay, and this row is finished. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to repeat the same pattern, so chain 1 and work back loop only, yarn over slip stitches into every stitch. Make sure you always count them. If you did the same stitch count as me, you should always have 8 stitches. Again, as you get closer to the panel here, make sure you turn and find that very last stitch to work into. So we're going to work back and forth like this. And then once I get up here, I will show you what I do once I reach this side here where you can't really see the stitches. So on the ribbing, on the side of the ribbing, you really can see the stitches really well, so you know where you need to join. Up here you don't, so I'm gonna work a few more rows here and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I just worked my ribbing rows here past the bottom ribbing, and now I am here where I would need to slip stitch into the side of the main panel here. So as I mentioned previously, the stitches here are not clear, so the way I figured how many rows I need going up this way is basically based on the gauge on my bottom ribbing. So I figured that the gauge on my bottom ribbing is approximately 4 rows per inch. So if you look here, I have exactly 4 rows in 1 inch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically I want to have 4 rows of ribbing in every inch on the side here as well. If I look at my pattern here, 1 inch is approximately 2 rows. So it's 1 pattern repeat. So those 2 rows that we kept repeating, right? So 1 row of single crochet, chain 2 single crochet, and 1 row of double crochets. So basically we want to have 4 rows of ribbing for every repeat, 2 row repeat. Okay, so for every 2 rows here, I'm going to have 4 rows of ribbing. Now that we've determined that, we can just work our way up, and you can keep checking as you go. It doesn't have to be very exact, so you just make sure that you do 2 slip stitches every time into the side. So the way I would do it is, as you turn your panel here, you try to find 2 loops. I like to do it into 2 loops because the gaps will be smaller. If the loops are too tight, you can also do it through 1. So there is no exact science here on where you should insert your hook, so you just use your best judgment and you insert your hook into the sides of stitches. So I'm going to do 1 slip stitch here and then going to this next spot and find 2 loops and do another slip stitch right there. Okay, so now I can turn and work my way back. So skip 2 and work my pattern. So now you're just going to work your rows up and down all the way up this panel, and every time you reach the level of a stitch marker where you want your buttonholes to be, remember to create another buttonhole by working 2 chains in the middle on your way towards the panel, and then work on top of them as you go back out. So you're going to create those for as many stitch markers as you have. So I only have 3, so I only have 2 more from my size sweater. If you decided to add an extra button further up, then you'll have to do 1 more of those. Other than that, you're just going to work your regular ribbing rows, joining with 2 slip stitches every time you get towards the panel, and you're going to work it all the way up. I generally like to work 1 slip stitch into the shoulder seam here as well. And then when you're here in the back, you will have defined stitches, so you can do 1 slip stitch in every stitch. Then as you come around this way, you can do another one in the shoulder seam, and then you're going to work your way back on the opposite panel. So obviously on the opposite panel you will no longer have any buttonholes, so you don't have to do the chains in the middle anymore. The only thing that I do recommend is after you're done working one side, that you count how many rows you ended up on this side. So you want to know how many rows of ribbing you have from the very bottom and up to the shoulder seam right here. Okay, the ones in the back don't matter as much. So you want to match the same number of rows on the opposite panel. So whatever the number of rows is from the shoulder seam to the very bottom of the panel on one side, you want to try and match it on this side. And a little tip here, as you go up, if you see that your ribbing starts to bunch up or curl like that, that means you have too many ribbing rows on this side. So you can adjust the number of ribbing rows, and you might have to unravel a little bit and do fewer ribbing rows per row of panel. Okay. However, if it looks like the panel is starting to pull up this way, that means it might be a little too tight and you need more rows of ribbing. So you can always see how it looks before you're all the way up here and see if you need to adjust. All right, so I'm going to work all my ribbing rows all the way around for the edging here, and I'll meet you back here once we're done with this step. Okay, so I finished my edging here for the opening, and I ended up with a total of 78 rows of ribbing on each side from the very bottom to the shoulder seam. Okay, so 78 rows on each side from the bottom to the shoulder seam, and then of course we have a few extra rows here in the back. Okay, so now that our ribbing is done, we can go ahead and sew on the buttons. So we want to identify the buttonholes that we made on this side here, and then go ahead and mark the area on the opposite side where we need to add our buttons. So you can go row by row and you can use the stitch markers that you used previously and find the spot where your buttonhole is and mark the same area on the opposite side. And we want to put the button somewhere right in the middle of that row. So I have 1, 2, 3, so row 3 right here. So I want to use row 3 on this side and right in the middle somewhere there. So this is where one of my buttons is going to go. Then I have one here, so I can just go row by row here. Make sure that I put that button into the same row on the opposite side. Right there. And then I have one more. So let's see. Just gonna walk up my fingers and find the next one, which is going to be right here. Now we can go ahead and sew on our buttons. So obviously we're going to need some sewing thread and a regular sewing needle. So I'm going to use the color that matches my button. So I recommend that you use either a color that matches your button or a color that matches your sweater itself. So I'm going to use this brown, like chocolate brown thread to sew on my buttons. So my first button is going to go right here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to secure this thread on the back side here. Okay, so we're just going to try and find the middle of this row here, and it looks like it's going to be right here. And first thing I'm going to do is just go around a couple of stitches here and make sure that I fasten off my thread. So you want to go through the fibers, not through the whole stitch, so that your thread really gets secured in there. There you go. It feels pretty well knotted here. Now I'm going to bring it to the front and add my button. Okay, so we're just going to go through a few times just to make sure that it's nice and solid. And once you're satisfied with the number of times you went through the button and it's nice and tight, you can go ahead and fasten off in the back. So to fasten off, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go through a few fibers of any of the stitches here in the back, right there, and try to knot it. I'm going to do this a couple times. Go, and it feels pretty tight, so now I can go ahead and cut. Okay, so now I'm going to do the other two buttons. My buttons are done, and now all I have left to do is weave in all of my tails, and my project will be done.